Hi, everyone, and welcome to the lineup for this 26th day of May, 2022. I'm Barry Stagner, and before we jump in, I don't think I need to remind any of you to be praying for the families affected by this horrific event in Texas, where these 19 school children and 2 teachers were shot by a young man who was troubled in his early life by bullying and things of that nature. And it's just a horrific thing. So please continue to keep such families or these families in prayer. What a horrific loss. It's just unimaginable, the pain that they're going through right now. So we need to pray, not just for the comfort of the Lord, but for just the presence of God to strengthen and even those who are Christians who were affected by this. And I don't know that there are any specifically that come to mind. But it seems like God always has his people in close proximity of tragedy, even maybe experiencing it. So just want to encourage you in that. And secondly, as we now turn and jump into the program, every once in a while a headline pops that comes from a secular media outlet, and it's almost like it's pulled from the pages of Scripture. And I've at times past on other programs that I used to host, used to refer to it as a headline of the week, and we've got one this week. And I'm going to use it as a teaser and hang on to it till the end. But I think it's just stunning, once again, to see how the Word of God is completely accurate in the things that it has stated. And I'll remind us again also that we need to remember what prophecy is. Prophecy is God telling us what he's already seen and knows is going to happen. It's not predictions, it's history in advance. And God has already seen how the world is going to operate in the end. And he's had John the Beloved record that for us in the book of Revelation. Daniel jotted some things down, as well as Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah. And we have a bevy of information about the last days. More information. Some have even cited that there's 8 times as much information about the time surrounding the second coming of Jesus as there is his first. And boy, do we have things going on now. One of the things we know that's going to happen during the tribulation period is there's going to be a global system of governance. And as we have mentioned before, I'll say it again, this cannot develop during the tribulation. The wheels already have to be in motion prior to that, and they've been running forward and pushing forward on multiple levels. And I think it was George Bush Sr. who coined the phrase New World Order, at least introduced it publicly. And now we're seeing efforts that are basically global in nature and now in mainstream media reporting on this very effort. Our first story comes from Breitbart, and the headline reads Klaus Schwab lauds Davos elites. The future is built by us. Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, on Monday greeted members of the global elites gathered in Davos, Switzerland, with the salute, "The future is built by us, by a powerful community, as you hear in this room." History at a Turning Point, Government and Business Strategies is the theme for the 2022 edition of the 51-year-old non-government organization Lobbying, founded by the German engineer and economist. And on the evidence delivered on day one, at the famous Swiss ski resort, Schwab very much sees his organization at the forefront of shaping the world of tomorrow. He's the one who's initiated this great reset that they're trying to establish globally. Unfortunately, outsiders have not been consulted or invited to join the 2,500 people flown in from all around the world to be present. Schwab was quick to praise those gathered before him in his welcoming address. Again, he said, "The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community, as you hear in this room. We have the means to improve the state of the world, but two conditions are necessary," Schwab outlined. The first one is that we all act as stakeholders of larger communities, that we serve not only self-interest, but we serve the community. And that's what we call stakeholder responsibility. And second, that we cooperate. Schwab added climate change and preserving nature as something to urgently address, while concerns about high inflation will affect how to look at the future of the global economy. He pointed to fears of people plunged into poverty and dying of hunger. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also delivered an address on Monday, comparing his own country to Israel in a conversation with Schwab during an appearance via video link, Breitbart London reported. The highest-ranking American politician on show this year is Joe Biden's climate envoy, John Kerry, while Alok Sharma, who presided over the COP26 meeting in Glasgow last November, will be leading the UK government representative. And again, you've got a group that is basically stating, we're here to run the world, and everybody else needs to get in line. And these ideas that they, are presenting seems to leave them at the top of the food chain, so to speak, without any mention of them becoming like the rest of us. Like one of their promotions stated that in the near future, you will own nothing and be completely happy. Well, that's because they're going to own everything, and they're going to be completely happy too. The article closes by saying it has become ridiculous. You have executives flying into Switzerland in private jets and pledging to plant millions of trees as a carbon offset. Now, this is, again, the hypocrisy of this whole thing, flying in, stating basically that they're smarter than the rest of us and they're going to run the world. And the people, 2,500 people selected by Schwab and his elite board, are going to determine the future of the world. Well, the future of the world has already been revealed. God has already shared it with us, and we know exactly where things are going. There is going to be a new world order, but it won't be run by the World Economic Forum. Breitbart also reports on the same event, where George Soros tells Davos elites, "Defeat Putin or civilization may not survive the climate crisis." Climate, climate, climate. Billionaire globalist George Soros on Tuesday warned that mantra should be the world's focus, not Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because climate change is on the verge of becoming irreversible. All of which is to say why Vladimir Putin must be defeated, excuse me, so our focus can return to the future of the planet, lest we will all be dragged into a third world war, he said. Speaking at a private invitation-only dinner in Davos, Switzerland, Soros lamented Russia's invasion of Ukraine and delivering a host of unintended consequences as other issues that concern humanity, such as pandemics, climate change, and avoiding nuclear war, have had to take a back seat. That's why I say our civilization may not survive, he added. He then specifically addressed the Earth's future and need to preserve our civilization. Yet the experts tell us that we have already fallen far behind, and climate change is on the verge of becoming irreversible. That could be the end of our civilization, he said. And Soros is not alone in his fear for the future based on mass global conflict. It's just stunning. Again, the I don't know, pomposity, I guess, of these people. We've had multiple ice ages in the history of the world, and the climate does change. Temperatures, average global temperatures do go up and down. We've had majority or vast portions of the planet covered in ice in the past, and that has receded, and we've seen warmer periods of human history. The evidence and the scarring from basically glacier movement and all these other things. It's clearly on the face of the planet. And we also know the planet has endured a global flood. And yet here we are today, still plugging forward and moving ahead. And, the interesting thing about this to me is we often hear about the delicate balance of nature. And the curious thing about me is the same to me is the same people who talk about the delicate balance of nature talk about the fact that in the evolutionary sense, nature is red in tooth and claw, meaning it's very violent. And, we seem to have survived the loss of the dinosaurs okay. So I don't know, just this focus is really a power grab and nothing else. We've had this effort to, basically balance and equalize the world's financial uh, through the carbon footprint, the financial status, third world countries being their status, basically financial status being improved by first world countries sending them their money for violating their carbon footprint rule. And the interesting thing, the greatest violator of this doesn't even play this game, and that's China. And so the hopes of these guys, I don't know. It's strange to see people see themselves in such a light. We are the future of the world. Us 2,500 people that we selected are the ones that are going to change the world. Sounds like there's some pretty big egos going on out there in this community, and we know that there are, but there's the biggest ego of all that's going to come. He's called the Beast of Revelation, the first beast of Revelation 13, and he is indeed going to establish a single world rule, and it will be not under 2,500 people. It will be under 10 for a while and then 7, but he's going to be the focal point, and the world isn't just going to follow after him politically, they're going to worship him spiritually. This is what Revelation 13 says. And we see this whole type of mentality happening with climate change and this worship of the planet. And remember, worship means to prostrate and submit. So it doesn't always have, the musical aspect attached to it. It just means that someone bows before, and actually the Hebrew word for worship actually means to kiss the hand. So it's to bow to a ruler in absolute obedience. And that's where the world is headed. The world is going to kiss the hand of the Antichrist. And again, this movement and talk such as this is being normalized in the thinking of the world, and people are in agreement largely with this group. Yes, we need a group of people to lead the world, and we all have to be on the same page. Nobody can have anything more than anybody else, and everybody has to have equal pay no matter what their job may be. The Brownstone Institute says the World Health Organization treaty is tied to a global digital passport and ID system. The World Health Organization recently announced plans for an international pandemic treaty tied to a digital passport and digital ID system. Meeting in December 2021 in a special session for only the second time since the World Health Organization's founding in 1948, the Health Assembly of the WHO adopted a single decision titled The World Together. The WHO plans to finalize the treaty by 2024. It will aim to shift governing authority, now reserved to sovereign states, to the World Health Organization during a pandemic by legally binding member states to the World Health Organization's revised international health regulations. In January of 2022, the U.S. submitted proposed amendments to the 2005 International Health Regulations, which bind all 194 UN member states, which the World Health Organization Director General accepted and forwarded to other member states. In contrast to amendments to our own Constitution, these amendments will not require a 2/3 vote of our Senate, but a simple majority of the member states. Most of the public is wholly unaware of these changes, which will impact national sovereignty of member states, and the proposed amendments include, among others, the following. Among the changes, the WHO will no longer need to consult with the state or attempt to obtain verification. We talked about this last week from the state where a reported event of concern or a new outbreak is allegedly occurring. And the article goes on, but there's also reports that this is very unlikely to pass. But what we have to remember is that this is the strategy of this radical movement. They recognize that it's not, their plans aren't going to be immediately accepted the first time they're proposed, so they keep coming and coming and coming. And that's what has happened here in the United States of America and all around the world. Really, we just keep getting flooded with this Saul Alinsky type approach from the rules for radicals. You just keep telling the lie, keep telling the lie. And then soon it will be looked at as the truth. And that's where we are today. Times of Israel is reporting that Lapid and visiting Turkish foreign minister agree on a path forward to return ambassadors. Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu discussed the potential return of their country's ambassadors during a one-on-one meeting Wednesday, and the foreign ministry and Israeli official told the Times. The two diplomats reached an understanding on the issue that both sides are happy with. Sources indicate that restoring full diplomatic ties is not imminent, and the countries are adopting a gradual approach. The two ministers did not address the ambassador issue during their subsequent public statements, and there was no indication of a time frame for the move. After deadly clashes between the IDF and Gazans on the border in 2018, Turkey expelled Israel's envoy and subjected him to humiliating security check in front of cameras, causing Jerusalem to respond in kind. Lapid and Cavusoglu also discussed Hamas during their Wednesday meeting, and Israel is adamant that Turkey curb Hamas terror activities from its territory before full ties are restored. Now, again, recognizing that Turkey is a major player, if not the main player, in the invasion of Israel. We do know that there are Gog of Magog. We know that Gog is the region between Cappadocia and Media. That's the northeastern border of Turkey, modern-day Turkey. And so we know that they're going to play a significant role in that invasion. So these overtures are just basically a ruse, probably financial motivation behind it, because Turkey's having problems, as are many other countries in the world. And interesting article coming up in a few moments. So stay tuned, and you'll hear why that story is interesting, and why it's also just basically glad handing, and there's no real teeth behind it, so to speak. The Daily Sabah, a Turkish newspaper, says Russia on the brink of historic default as U.S. payment license expires. Russia was pushed closer to the brink of a historic debt default on Wednesday as the U.S. closed the last venue for Moscow to pay its billions in debt back to international investors as Washington ramps up pressure on the country following its invasion of Ukraine. The U.S. Treasury Department said on its latest website late on Tuesday it would not extend the license, which was set to expire at 12:01 a.m. Eastern Time or 4:01 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. On Wednesday, the license allowed Russia to make interest and maturity payments on its sovereign debt to U.S. persons. That waiver has allowed Russia to keep up government debt payments, but its expiry now appears to have made the default inevitable. The country's first major one on international sovereign bonds in more than a century. Almost $2 billion worth of payments on Russian international bonds fall due before the year end, and Western sanctions imposed after the Kremlin's February 24 invasion of Ukraine and the countermeasures from Moscow have complicated the movement of money across borders, yet Russia has made a conscious effort to keep paying bondholders. If bondholders don't get their money when the money's due, factoring in any grace periods that apply, Russia will be in default on sovereign debt, said Jay Oslander, a partner at a law firm, Wilk Oslander. And with the waiver gone, there seems to be no way for bondholders to get paid. And while the license only applies to U.S. persons, its lapse will make it challenging for Russia to pay other holders, given the integral part U.S. institutions play in the global financial system and the complexity of such payment measures. Our next story also kind of feeds into that, and the financial crisis that is going on in Russia seems to be deepening and deepening, and who knows where that's going to lead. We're hearing all kinds of things going on coming out of Russia, Putin going in for cancer surgery and potential coup happening and all kinds of things being reported. But this we do know is what's happening on the global scene, the financial scene, and it's all feeding into what's going to take place and be fulfilled during the tribulation. And we've been hearing talk about inflation here in the United States, weeks and weeks of records, high gas prices here in the U.S., and problems getting food and energy products around the world are happening. And Russia's having, a central role in this and causing great problems, not just around the world, but in their own country. And Zarazim is reporting that the Russian ruble loses free convertibility status. Free convertibility status simply means that your currency is easily traded into the currency of another country or for gold. And Russia has now lost that status, again, making it more difficult, backing up our last story, for Russia to participate in the global market. And that includes getting paid for their energy products. As Western sanctions began to bite down on the Russian economy, Russian independent news outlet The Bell provided some insight into the ruble losing freely convertible status due to financial pressure coming from Western capitals over the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine. The ruble is no longer a freely convertible currency, former finance minister Alexei Kudrin admitted Tuesday to journalists. And prior to late February, the ruble was one of the world's few dozen fully convertible currencies. Not even the Chinese renminbi enjoyed such a status, wrote The Bell. Even Kudrin, who is considered to be close to President Vladimir Putin, was unable to hide his disappointment. And it was deeply symbolic that it was Kudrin who was the first official to talk publicly about the end of convertible currency era. And finance minister in 2006, when the ruble gained its freely convertible status, Kudrin said last year in an interview that this achievement was one of the proudest moments of his government. The convertibility of the ruble will remove all barriers to investment, Kudrin said in 2006, shortly after the status was confirmed. It makes the Russian market more attractive. Planning to make the ruble convertible again is something from the realms of fantasy, the article says. For a start, currency controls would have to be removed. Sanctions, even though they're continuing to tighten, makes it totally unrealistic. Without some type of geopolitical normalization, removing currency controls could prompt an uncontrollable capital outflow and an increasing risk of financial instability, a source at a foreign financial institution told The Bell. Now, again, recognizing that there's going to be, cataclysmic financial instability around the world, as we see in the book of Revelation, and we're going to talk about more about that in a few moments. But everything is headed towards its fulfillment during the tribulation. And that again reminds us how close we are and how passionate we are, or should be, I should say, about the lost and perishing around us. Time's running out. And, these things aren't just, there has been a season. I remember I did another program for some 7 years talking about the ebb and flow of prophecy. And, things would move ahead and then they'd kind of calm down, and then there'd be another surge and then they'd calm down. But there is a point in time, and I would mention this every time we brought it up, that there is a point of no return where things begin to advance, and they are going to advance to their fullness. And here we are in many conditions that have never been experienced by the world. All things that are happening that are related to the tribulation period are different now. One, because we have the war coalition involved and in coalition together that's going to invade Israel. We have a growing animosity and anti-Semitism around the world, like Zechariah 12:3 says is going to be. The nations of the world are gathering against Israel. We have efforts to unify global markets, and the geopolitical climate around the world is pointing to, we have to put all these other things, this nationalist idea behind us, and we have to all come together with this egalitarian thinking that everything is equal, every country is equal, every country has the same thing, every person can enjoy the same level of pay, and all these things are all feeding into what's going to happen during the tribulation. Now, partially to show the strain on the Russian economy, this story comes from Al Arabiya, obviously an Arab newspaper, English version, that says Russia allows gas flows to Gazprom marketing and trading for 90 days. Remember, they had cut off supplies, or at least hindered their full supply into European markets and elsewhere. And Russia gave permission for natural gas supplies to Gazprom Marketing and Trading Singapore, part of Gazprom Germania, and Yamal LNG project for 90 days, a government decree showed on Wednesday. And the move comes less than 2 weeks after the Kremlin said the Russian sanctions imposed on state gas company Gazprom's former German unit and other entities meant they could not receive gas supplies from Russia. And Germany, Russia's top client in Europe in early April, transferred Gazprom Germania and energy trading, storage, and transmissions business, ditched by Russia's Gazprom, to its energy regulator to ensure energy security. And energy ties between Russia and Europe plunged into crisis after Moscow started what it calls a special military operation in Ukraine on February 24. And the West responded with sweeping sanctions that put Russia on the brink of recession and a default on external public debt, as we just read. Now, I mentioned at the outset that we've got a headline of the week. Well, this isn't it, but this is headline of the week B, I guess I should say. This is a pretty major story, and also coming out of Israel from the Jewish News Syndicate. And the headline reads, Israel hammers out deal to supply natural gas to Europe via Egypt. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has emphasized to both Israel and Europe the importance of natural gas, even if only as a transitional energy source on the way to renewables. For the past month, Israel has been negotiating an agreement to sell natural gas to Europe via Egypt, Israel's energy ministry revealed on Sunday. The negotiations were spurred by a meeting between Israel's energy minister, Karine El-Bahar, and European Commissioner Energy Kadri Simpson in Paris in late March, according to the energy ministry spokesman. The Europeans told the Israelis at the meeting that if they could not find alternatives, they would return to coal mining despite the great environmental damage caused by it, the spokesman told JNS. Following the meeting, an Israeli-European team was set up to work out a political framework in coordination with the Egyptians to enable gas to flow to Europe. Energy Ministry Director Lior Shalat, who is leading the talks, said Egypt is involved because Israel doesn't have the technical resources to send gas to Europe directly. The best way, he said, is to send the gas to Egypt's liquefied natural gas terminal near Alexandria, where it would be processed and sent on to Europe by ship. The catalyst for Europe's urgency is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has awakened the continent to the danger of relying on Russian fossil fuels. Russia has exploited Europe's dependence to impose its will, and it appears, for example, that European energy companies will submit to Moscow's demand that it receive gas payments in rubles, a move that would shore up Russia's economy while undermining European sanctions. Now, again, remember what the motivation is for the invasion of Israel. The protesting nations listed in Ezekiel 38 and 39 as Sheba and Dedan, or the Arab Gulf states, is what's this invasion all about? Have you come to take plunder and booty? And basically that tells us that the invasion is going to be motivated economically. And this, I believe, and many others have believed, is going to be a significant catalyst in advancing that desire to invade Israel and to halt the invasion of the European market. That's the last thing the Russians need, is for Europe to be free of natural gas. And, again, remembering that their gross domestic product, 60% of it is energy-related products. So that's why they extended this agreement for 90 days with Gazprom to keep funding coming into the country, and for Israel to come in and take a big chunk of that European market, if not all the Russian portion, would be catastrophic to them. Now, we also have to remember that Turkey has been very aggressive in their position on mining natural gas out of Cyprus and that particular region, claiming territorial rights. And so they have an energy interest as well, and their economy has been struggling also. So the last thing they need is competition in the European market as well. And therefore, this is a major, major move in relation to the potential of sparking that invasion that takes place from the north. And we do know, again, that there are Turkish, Iranian, and Russian troops on the northern border of Israel. And we know that these three countries also have a relationship with Libya and Sudan, and they are the other two nations named that will invade Israel from the north. Times of Israel is reporting terror groups threatened to respond to settler thuggery during Flag March. Al-Mayadeen, a Lebanese network close to Hamas and Hezbollah terror groups, reported that Palestinian groups are not ruling out a response from Gaza should there be provocations during Sunday's Flag March in Jerusalem. And the response to the provocations will be from all the arenas, including Gaza. Al-Mayadeen reports the terror groups informed Egyptian and international mediators. Israeli networks reported on Tuesday that Israel had sent a message to the groups via the mediators, hoping for calm, but threatened to strike Gaza if violence breaks out. The Flag March, which is a procession of religious nationalists through Jerusalem's Old City, is set to be held on Sunday evening. Hamas fired rockets at Jerusalem area last year during the march, which is held in honor of Israel's 1967 capture of East Jerusalem. This year's procession is set to be carried out amidst high tension between Israel and the Palestinians. Israel police said on Wednesday that 3,000 officers were deployed to secure the march, and the resistance informed mediators that it will not allow settler thuggery in Jerusalem. Settler thuggery to them is carrying your national flag through part of your own capital city. And again, looking at what we've got as far as a historical track record in the international community when Israel responds to attacking their citizens, there's no mention of the attack on the Israeli citizens. It's always the response that comes into the media's view. And this is just more and more anti-Semitism at higher and higher levels around the world, just like the Bible says. Now, here's another interesting story I think many of us have been hearing about, and it's just so bizarre to watch this happen. And I think the one thing we need to pause and point out is that Paul told the church at Thessaloniki in the last days there'll be a strong delusion, a delusion that comes about that causes those under it even to believe the lie. Now, that's all it says. It calls it the lie. And basically, because it's singular, it has to be pointing to one particular lie. And I believe that particular lie is the lie of the Antichrist, that he has the answers and he is worthy of worship and that he is God himself. And we see in Revelation 13 that the whole world will worship the beast. All those whose names have not been written in the Lamb's Book of Life will worship the beast. Now, again, there's going to be saints during the tribulation. And this is a question that comes up over and over and over. If there's saints in the tribulation, doesn't that mean that the church is going to go through the tribulation? No, it doesn't. We've got a list of Old Testament saints who were never part of the church that are used as an example to the church about what real faith looks like in Hebrews chapter 11. So there's Old Testament saints, there's New Testament saints or church age saints, and then there's tribulation saints. They are distinct groups, but they are saved by the same blood of the one Savior, and that is Jesus Christ the Lord. So just because there's saints mentioned in Revelation doesn't mean the church is going through the tribulation. It just means they became saints the same way we did, by believing and trusting in the Lord Jesus Christ. And people are just gullible today because they are under delusion. And as much as the media has shown itself to be untrustworthy, and as much as the governments around the world have shown the same, people fall in line immediately, which again is necessary for the fulfillment of the tribulation things and the mentality of so many people in the world. Well, the government said it, so it must be true. Well, the Epoch Times reports monkeypox games could lay groundwork for the WHO pandemic response takeover. The World Health Organization, now pay attention to this story, this is interesting. The World Health Organization is responding to a string of monkeypox outbreaks and will be convening an emergency meeting on the virus and its global spread. In terms of government power, the timing of this outbreak couldn't be better for the World Health Organization, which may soon be granted powers to manage laws on global health outbreaks, and which is oddly well positioned for a monkeypox outbreak following a recent germ games call and recent incidents tied to figures who include Microsoft billionaire Bill Gates. The New York Post declared the World Health Organization is reportedly convening an emergency meeting into the alarming spread of monkeypox around the world, including a possible case singular in the Big Apple. That's the alarming spread, one case. The Telegraph reports that the UN Health Authority will be bringing together a group of leading experts in the meeting, which is believed to be focused on how the virus is suddenly spreading so widely. It also allegedly will look into the virus prevalence among homosexual men and on the vaccination situation. The number of infections are by no means high. By May 23rd, the University of Oxford and Harvard Medical School recorded, get this, on a planet of 8 billion, 245 cases. 245 cases. And this is alarming to the World Health Organization, and it's a global spread. Now, Sajid Javid, the UK Health Secretary, wrote on Twitter, most cases are mild. And the timing of this is all important. It gives the WHO a chance to show its worth since it's in the process of trying to get new and expansive powers under the banner of governing global health emergencies. The United Nations is considering various amendments to the WHO at its 75th World Health Assembly in Geneva that could give its Director General, Tedros Adhanom, the unilateral authority to declare a public health emergency with far-reaching powers over the laws of sovereign nations. Not only would this give Tedros the ability to declare a public health emergency in any nation he wants using whatever evidence he wants, but it would also give him allow him to dictate policies that the target country should adopt to respond to the UN's declared emergency. If a country refuses a proposed amendment, could give the WHO the ability to sanction the country. If you don't do what the World Health Organization says, you could be sanctioned according to this amendment. The Epoch Times is also reporting that respiratory surveillance platforms include video cameras and recorders that alert authorities. This is part of the package of monitoring this crisis that has spread globally to 245 people, acting in a manner that could indicate the presence of an infectious disease or help spread one already present in a population. Such equipment is widely used in China already. Whether or not monkeypox poses a large threat to public health, it presents a serious threat to public freedom. The virus could act as a Trojan horse, carrying inside it all the justifications to grant the WHO a dictator's dream of global power and give the CDC a system of surveillance beyond anything Orwell could have conceived. Under normal circumstances, monkeypox wouldn't be a large viral threat. The CDC says it can be transmitted human to human mainly by respiratory droplets that typically don't travel more than a few feet. And so the CDC notes that only prolonged face-to-face contact is required. Even Biden is walking back his statements that people should be concerned about monkeypox and is clarifying that it's not as serious of a threat as COVID-19. And regardless of the inability to spread widely under normal circumstances, a global discussion on monkeypox vaccines started, get this, in 2021. Isn't this 2022? So last year they're talking about vaccines for monkeypox after Gates warned of a smallpox bioterrorist attack as a potential next pandemic. He called on the world leaders to hold germ games and give the WHO new powers similar to the ones that they may soon receive under new WHO pandemic task force. Now, why is Bill Gates influencing the World Health Organization? Because he has money, not because he has a doctor, not because he's trained in any way, shape, or form, but because he has money and he donates. And therefore, he's got a voice at the table, which is just proving itself continually to be catastrophic. Basically that tells us the World Health Organization is for sale. If you're not a doctor, keep your mouth shut. You got nothing to say when it comes to vaccines and those types of things as far as whether or not they ought to be used on other people. And yet Gates is looked to as one of the foremost leaders in opinion on these types of things. And again, just prepping the world for the acceptance of a instruction that is worldwide in order to conduct business, to buy or sell, as we see during the tribulation period. Now, Zero Hedge is reporting that the UK braces for internet blackouts due to the coming wave of bankruptcies. And again, news from all over the world about financial strife going on. Internet blackouts as a result of a wave of bankruptcies and broadband networks could be on their way. British daily newspaper, The Telegraph, noted this week that certain smaller broadband suppliers are being pushed to the brink, that the effects of inflation could eventually leave homes without connectivity. Ofcom, the government approved regulatory and competition authority for broadcasting, telecommunications, and postal industries of the UK, is already in the midst of drawing up contingency plans with telecom company BT to take on thousands of its customers if smaller suppliers begin to fail. Well, there goes competition. BT has seen more than 150 smaller challengers materialize and try to compete with it, and many of these companies have been backed by private equity, pension funds, and sovereign wealth, the report notes. But there could be too many cooks in the proverbial kitchen, and the increased competition means some companies are going to be pushed to the brink, the report notes. One industry told the Telegraph it seems to be a bit of a red flashing light that Ofcom is thinking about it at all. It cannot be entirely sustainable when you already have big network builders. A smaller provider, People's Fiber, was already bought out by the bankruptcy administration by Swish Fiber last December. Now, as we move from the UK to the US, I think we've all been watching the economy. It's funny here in California. Housing prices are always kind of at the top of the scale in our nation. And, for a homeowner here in Southern California, watching our home grow to just unbelievable prices has been kind of nice. But we also know that there's about a 12-year cycle where things will again correct themselves. And some say it's going to happen. Others say there's enough fail-safes in place now that 2008 will never repeat itself. But it seems as though there is a slowing in the housing market. And it is really, I think, a pivotal issue in measuring how the economy is doing overall. The Gateway Pundit says the Biden economy, new home sales plummet. Fears of recession on the rise. New home sales are plummeting as concerns about a recession are on the rise, and the housing market is seeing signs of slowing down. Home prices have rose by 18.8% last year, according to the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller National Home Price Index, a method of measuring average home prices in major metropolitan areas, the Wall Street Journal reported. Fewer home buyers are first-time buyers, down to 27% in January of this year from 33% the year before, the National Association of Realtors stated, according again to the Wall Street Journal. Home prices are continuing to rise despite the Fed's increasing of interest rates. A February poll of 33 property analysts estimated U.S. housing prices rising by 10.3% this year, according to Reuters. Home prices rose to the median price of $375,000 in March of this year. Any of you who have been around for a while, like I have, remember what was going on in the 80s and inflation. And some of you will probably be stunned at this number. But I had friends who were losing their homes because they had a variable interest rate loan, and interest rates were 14 and 15%. And we're seeing a climb where we've enjoyed, 2 and 3% interest rates here for a while. And now we see they're trying to stave this off, the rising house prices, by increasing the interest rate. Stocks are down, inflation is up, and it's difficult to know what to do in this Biden economic mess. Housing sales are down. These are very stressful and unique times we are in. And tragically, almost everyone has similar concerns. Now, our next story is very, very curious. And, considering some of the things that are going to happen during the tribulation period, we know the loss of sea life is going to happen. We know that there's atmospheric events that will take place that will kill a third of the fish in the sea and burn up a third of the green grass on the earth and kill all the trees and all these other things going on. But this story I found to be quite interesting. It comes from Israel 365 News. Israeli expedition discovers virus that can severely affect oxygen production from oceans. Oxygen production from oceans. People think that the world's oxygen is produced via photosynthesis by green plants growing on Earth. But in fact, half of the precious gas that we need to breathe is manufactured by single-cell plants that live in the ocean. One of the major groups of these plants are cyanobacteria, also formerly known as blue-green algae. Like plants on land, cyanobacteria trap carbon dioxide to produce oxygen and organic compounds such as fats and sugars. Like any other organism, cyanobacteria sometimes get infected by viruses. Now, a team headed by Professor Debbie Lindell from the biology faculty Technion Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa has found that just like humans, cyanobacteria can experience viral epidemics that significantly affect their population. At least half of the Earth's oxygen production and primary production of organic compounds comes from the ocean. Oceans cover 70% of the planet's surface. They drive weather, regulate temperature, yet much remains unknown about the oceans and the organisms that live in them. The work of Professor Lindell's lab, therefore, helps shed a little light onto the depths of the oceans. These findings were published in Nature Microbiology under the title Viruses Affect Picocyanobacterial Abundance and Biogeography in the North Pacific Ocean. Dr. Michael Carlson, a postdoctoral fellow in Lindell's lab, sailed along the Pacific Ocean to study the populations of two common cyanobacteria, Prochlorococcus and Synechococcus, and the two groups live in different latitudes. Prochlorococcus lives in warmer climates and have fewer nutrients, while Synechococcus prefers colder and more nutrient-rich latitudes. In the area between both thrive and create a hotspot of, they call it a cyanobacteria city. They studied the amount of cyanophage infected with picocyanobacteria in 87 surface water samples from 5 narrow sections that covered some 2,200 kilometers in the North Pacific on 3 cruises that lasted for 2 to 4 weeks between 2015 and 2017. It turned out this 550-kilometer wide hotspot is unfortunately a focal point of much viral activity. Much like a bustling city sees considerably more viral infection than a remote village, in the cyanobacteria city, more cyanobacteria are infected 3 times more normally, as Lindell and Carson saw in 2015 and 2016. When the team arrived at the same location a year later, they found Prochlorococcus population in the hotspot significantly reduced and suffering from 10 times more infection than normal. In 2017, the Prochlorococcus population declined at 17 degrees Celsius. Then, normally to these cyanobacteria are comfortable at temperatures as low as 12 degrees. The Prochlorococcus, in short, suffered a virus outbreak, causing a high percentage of them to die. Now, again, just this story is interesting, and I'm sure for most of us, it's like, what does all that mean? Well, it impacts the oxygen producing capabilities of the ocean on a very small scale. Obviously, 550 square kilometers was the area that they were talking about, but it does introduce something that I'd never heard of before, and that is the potential for the ocean to have its oxygen producing capabilities infected virally. And that would fall under pestilence. We always think of it as infecting humans or affecting the animal kingdom, but this obviously takes it down to a little bit smaller level, and the level of blue algae out in the oceans, which produce life-giving oxygen to all of us. So again, all things are on the move, and what that means in the long term, that I don't know, and I don't think they know either. All they do know is something's going on, something strange is going on, and it just points our minds to what's going to happen during the tribulation. Massive death in the sea. Eventually, remember, during the tribulation, everything in the ocean is going to die. Everything. Could it be just a rampant virus? Yeah, it could be. We know that there's going to be cataclysmic events that impact it, to be sure, but, could this also play a part? We don't know, but it does introduce something into our thinking. Well, here we go. Here's our headline of the week. And again, I just want to tease you a little bit with this, but I think it's really interesting to see this particular title, and it comes from the Western Journal, and it is as if it's ripped right out of the pages of Scripture, specifically from Revelation chapter 6 and what's going to happen during the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Now, here's what the headline says. People starting to go hungry as food prices soar. Some barely able to afford one meal a day. What's going to happen during the tribulation? with the great famine that takes place and the beasts of the earth killing humans and other people, other beasts, in order to get a piece of the meager food supply. We're told that basically what's necessary to feed one person one meal for one day is what's going to be happening during the tribulation period on a global scale. What does this say? Some are barely able to afford one meal per day. And again, that may seem, I hope it's not anticlimactic, but I think it's amazing to see things like this popping up in secular media that the Bible told us is coming. And at a time, the article says from the Western Journal, when experts are warning about global food shortages, a new report from Canada says individuals living on government benefits are forced to live with less. Stephen Jones, 56, told the Toronto Globe and Mail that Canada's inflation has forced him to change his shopping habits with an eye on price. Sometimes even that's not enough. Sometimes by the end of the month, we're getting to the due date for the money. I'm down maybe just a very small meal one time per day, he said, according to the newspaper report. I'm on the verge of having to skip meals altogether in a day and not eat at all and save his meal for the next day. Jones is living on $1,200 a month in disability benefits, about $940 in U.S. currency, $940 a month, which have supported him for the past 15 years after he had to give up his career in finance due to debilitating depression. But times have changed. Although at 6.8%, Canada's April inflation rate trailed the 8.3 rate in the U.S. under the Biden administration, it was still, for Canada, a 31-year high. Grocery prices rose 10% over the year, the highest spike since 1981, the Globe and the Mail reported. And Toronto's Daily Bread food bank had about 160,000 visits in March, a record high and 134% increase compared to pre-pandemic levels, according to the paper. People have gotten to the end of their savings. They're growing in debt. Neil Hetherington, chief executive officer at Daily Bread, said, and told the Globe and the Mail, so they're going to be turning to food banks even more. Now, completing this poll, I'm sorry, there was an ad in the middle of my article. I know that these places are very accommodating and non-judgmental, but there's an element of shame in doing that. But at some point, I'm going to have to do it, he went on to say. A Canadian agriculture expert, Kim McConnell, told the Edmonton Journal that many Canadians are likely to find themselves in the same position. There's going to be a lot of hungry people. These inflation numbers are meals that people will be going without, he told Globe and the Mail, projecting his visits could hit 225,000 per month. I'm an incredibly optimistic guy, but I'm very concerned about the next 2 years. And again, this was Hetherington at the Toronto Food Bank. So again, just looking at the news and seeing something that's almost a literal or verbatim quote from what Revelation 6 tells us is going on, that one meal is going to cost a day laborer's full day's pay just to eat one meal. And now this very language is being used. You know, the world is headed toward what the tribulation has been revealed to us to contain. All these things are going to happen exactly as God foresaw them and now has told us. And just to see is again, and pardon me for using the same phraseology over and over, but listen, all the spokes on the wheels are turning. Everything is headed in the same direction. We've reached that point of no return, I do believe, because there are so many things that are coming to a head simultaneously. Israel is advancing in age, 74 years old now. Full generation is about to come to pass, whatever that number may be, before all the things spoken of in the Olivet Discourse are going to come to pass, which are initiated by the rebirth of the nation of Israel, and where the fig tree blossoms once again and buds and puts forth leaves and all those things that we're seeing happen in Israel. And it just reminds us that God is so gracious and kind to tell us of these things, and that they are something that we can avoid by being taken in a moment and a twinkling of an eye at the rapture of the church, and escape all the things that are coming upon the whole world. And listen, this is just an incredible time for all of us to be alive. And as I encourage you frequently, we need to be telling people about Jesus, because he's the only way to get out of this mess that this world is in when he comes for his church. and the angel sounds his trumpet, the dead in Christ rise, and we are who are alive and remain meet the Lord in the air and are forever to be with the Lord. What an awesome hope that is. And Paul even told the church at Thessaloniki, comfort one another with these words. Don't be acting like this isn't going to happen or that it's something silly. Talk about it. Remind each other in the midst of all this. And this world is a mess, and things are getting more and more violent every day. And that's very Noah-like. Of the limited information we have about the days of Noah, Jesus made sure that we knew that it would be as it was in the days of Noah. What do we know about the days of Noah? The thoughts and intents of man's heart was only evil continually, and the earth was filled with violence. And it just the shootings that we're seeing happening all around the world are just is daily. Shooting of schools and elderly and all these things that just prove to us again that the loss of natural affection that the Bible has predicted is in full swing, and everything is moving toward that point in time. And you add that with the coalition forces being gathered on the northern border of Israel now making an agreement with Egypt to do what Russia can't afford them to do, what Turkey won't allow them to do, or at least they will try and keep them from doing, and that has entered into the European gas market, natural gas market. So just all cylinders are running. Everything is moving forward. Jesus is coming soon, and that's the best news you're going to hear all day. So once again, our little teaser about the headline of the week is that there is a report that one person has stated, I'm only able to eat one meal a day because of the financial strain that has happened because of what's happening in our world. So again, awesome time to be alive, difficult time to be alive. The Bible even described them as perilous, but I always find it interesting that in 2 Timothy 3:1-5, where the character flaws of humanity that are present within the church, that's what Paul is talking about. He's saying this is what the church is like, not the world. The world's always been like this. But the first thing that he mentions is that men will be lovers of self-centered, greedy, and all the things that come along with it. And boy, if that isn't a fitting description of our world today, I don't know what is. Well, that's all we have for today, and I pray that you were encouraged and enlightened a bit, and certainly informed about what's going on in our world. And remember, keep those folks in Texas in prayer. And I got a kick out of all your comments about Louis last week. He's doing great and growing like crazy, eating like a maniac, and we just love him to death. So thanks for all your kind words. I really enjoyed reading them online. Let me just say this. Hey, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. You can find it under the name The Truth About God, or just simply search for my name. I'd appreciate, for you to like the page and subscribe as well. And, we are being still restricted, especially on Facebook. They just don't let anybody see this program, which is broadcast there, as well as YouTube. But we get a little bit stronger response from YouTube. So I'd appreciate some of you Facebook followers to go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel there, and hit the notifications bell as well. As I said, that's it for this week. I pray that you have a blessed week, and maybe the Lord will come get us this week, and I won't see you here on the lineup, but I will see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.